Hello, hello, and welcome to another Unstoppable Stories. I'm Sherry Danzig of Choosing Vibrancy, and I really do believe that we get to choose how we live. And I think everybody, if they could, would choose to live vibrantly versus not. So today I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Suzanne Jabour. She's from Vancouver, Canada, and she's going to share her unstoppable story. And let me just say why I love sharing these stories is because I think we all at times face some sort of giant roadblock or conflict. It's fear, let's call it what it is, and it's disguised in some way. And our monkey mind starts talking to us and telling us we can't do it. And so then we have to backpedal and we have to have a conversation with our monkey mind. And I think that these stories are really fun, inspiring ways to hear someone else's story about how they triumphed over something. So the inclination might be to throw in the towel. And when we push through it, though, there's always triumph and joy and learning. And so that's really what, our belief is here with choosing vibrancy is that there's true growth and true joy when you learn how to be unstoppable. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Suzanne, to share your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for opening up this platform for people to just share, as you say, those bumps in the road, those ruptures that come along in our life, and give us an opportunity to choose. Because you're so right. It's about the little choices we make, the big choices we make every moment of every day. And my story is full of really having to be intentional and having to choose and having to rebuild from what felt and continues to be catastrophic, but as you say, has led to astonishing growth and pivoting and different ways of understanding how the world works and how people work. And I'm so grateful that people are now studying post-traumatic growth. There's a name for it. We know it's a thing. And it doesn't happen always, and it doesn't happen for everyone. And I'm not here to sort of sugarcoat anyone who's had a trauma and say, oh, well, you're just supposed to carry on and grow from it. But
Mhm.
we do get to choose, and we choose how we respond to what happens to us. That's our journey on this planet. My catastrophic story that made me unstoppable, the last thing that happened that made me even more unstoppable
Mhm.
was the death of my son. And as you can imagine, as a parent, receiving that middle of the night phone call from the police to notify me that Ben had died was exactly as catastrophic, horrifying, disorienting, discombobulating. It's all the things we don't want to happen. And for most parents, we sometimes imagine what that might be like, but we don't even really want to let ourselves imagine because it's so horrifying and so distressing. We can't imagine our lives without our children in them because it's just not how it's supposed to go.
Right.
And unfortunately, for lots of us as parents, it is the way that it happens. And what I realized very early on, like in the early days and weeks, was that I had to make choices.
Mm.
I had to decide that my life was going to be exactly as big and vibrant and exciting as it would have been had Ben still been here, because that's how I wanted to honor him. That's how my life could be lived in a way that carried him with me and that honored the big, exciting, vibrant life that he led and should be continuing to lead, as far as I'm concerned. What that meant for me was I understood, I got this download. So for me, that's where you kind of skip the phases of like, I think something, I believe something, I know something, and you just go right to the knowing part. Wherever you
Mhm.
think that comes from, it doesn't matter. We don't need to debate that, but it does happen to us where
Yeah.
we get that sense of, oh, like this is the only way. And I knew for me, the only way to survive it was to be conscious and curious.
Mhm.
So that became my mantra. And it really was about conscious of all the emotions,
Yeah.
of the horror, the despair, the love, the hope, it all kind of in grief happens concurrently. I remember my daughter saying, Mom, like it's all the emotions all the time.
Mhm.
So that was the choice, to stay conscious to all of that, because we're so conditioned really to be unconscious to our emotions. And it does us such detriment. And I knew I didn't want to be someone whose repressed emotions had become malignant. I was very clear that was not going to be my story. I
Right.
was going to feel them all and let them flow through and just navigate them as best I knew how. The curiosity part really was what ultimately, now just over 3 years later, continues to allow me to grow and to learn new things and to really come to understand, for me, what's now become my passion and my mission, helping people understand grief better and support each other better.
Mhm.
Really, in the early days, started out wondering how on earth you're supposed to breathe when all you can do is sob so hard that there's no breath able to get into your body, right?
Mm.
How are you supposed to exist in a world where you're in a post apocalyptic nightmare and everyone else is carrying on like nothing happened,
Right.
right?
Right.
There was so much curiosity just about how is this supposed to happen? Why are these things true? How does even grief work? I didn't know enough about grief for my own grieving to be able to do that well. So becoming really a student of that, and that to me, it's interesting how when we have these catastrophic things happen to us, they clarify a bunch of things we've probably been working on for years, if not decades. And for
Mm.
me, that's what happened. And being able to have that mantra of, conscious and curious. Am I being conscious? Am I repressing anything? Am I denying anything? Am I holding curiosity, even though that feels almost impossible? And curiosity can be as small as, I'd be standing in the shower, not remembering how to do that and thinking, how do I shower? Okay, well, I should do my hair first, right?
Mhm.
So the curiosity doesn't have to be big, but it does keep you moving and it keeps you growing. And so if I was going to leave the listeners with any kind of, touchstone to hold on to if you're feeling in that post-apocalyptic place,
Mhm.
which we all have happened to us. We have little ruptures and we have big ones that just blow our life up. If you can hold those two things, if you can be conscious and curious, and just keep going one breath, one small choice, one baby step at a time,
Mm.
there is a way to carry on. If it's about the loss of a loved one, there's a way to build a life that honors them, that honors you, that carries them with you. And it's done one small step at a time.
Mm. Wow, that really touches me. I I relate to that only in the fact what you said about, sometimes I have to stop myself because there's times
Yeah.
where I get fearful and I imagine something and my worst nightmare, which would be getting a phone call like what you just described.
Yeah.
And then I have to stop because I'll be sobbing and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
This is something I've made up, but it's
Yes.
almost like that psyche of wanting to prepare for something that is like your deepest fear. I
Yeah.
love all that you said, and I want to really put an extra emphasis on what you said earlier about feeling everything, allowing yourself to feel, to not stuff it, to not push it down, to not deny it, to not make it, have to make excuses for yourself, to feel any of that, but simply to be as present with yourself as you know to be. I think that is huge. Not easy to
Yeah.
do
No.
and really, really important.
Yeah, and to
So,
not make any of it wrong. We're so
yeah,
conditioned to think, oh, we should have all these positive emotions. I have a whole problem with that structure, but we want the positive ones. We don't want the negative ones. They all have value. They all have something to teach
right.
us.
Yeah,
And, no, we don't want to stay in the negative ones, but sometimes they're there and denying them doesn't help us.
yeah,
Denying is where we get stuck. People worry
right,
that if they feel the grief, if they allow it, they'll get stuck, but we actually get
right.
stuck trying to deny it.
The
That's
other
way
way.
more work.
That's right.
I can't
That's
even
right.
imagine I wouldn't have been able to, but it's way more work.
Right.
So if you can let it flow,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
wave to ride.
Yeah, a way of that's self-care,
Yeah.
honoring yourself to honor how you're feeling and let yourself, have the whatever timetable it takes to
Mhm.
be able to move through it. I think that is also super important that I'm hearing. All of this is really from a place of self-love and honoring yourself. And wow, that is a tremendous, unstoppable story. Thank you so much for sharing it. And I'm excited that if you like this story, We're going to come back in just a moment, and Suzanne's going to share her expertise in what she does and how her story has really inspired what she does professionally. So thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much, Suzanne.
Thank you.